Okay, if I could ask Brian to join me on the podium. And I also need to call up Brian Wright from Vattenfall. Brian is a portfolio director based, I believe, in Berlin. Although not always, because I'm sure we had a curry in Penzance a couple of years ago. I'm sure we did. And I'm also inviting Steen, I'll just call him Steen Brobeck, who started with the ABB Group, who's currently president and CEO of Semco, and a member of the board of directors of Confederation of Danish Industry, the energy section. So that makes up the panel, including me, I think, isn't it? So first questions, please. Who wants to be the first to buy a book off Brian? 25% discount, plus a signature.
I have a question. First, a big thank you to the organizers to welcome you here. I think this was mind-blowing, and I even got tears in my eyes at the last part of the story. But I think what I also see in let's say, in my personal development, sometimes you need to have a fatality, or you need to be at let's say, at the last mile of at a very strong accident before you start to react. You have been there. How have you seen your own journey in that?
Yeah, I've been through many fatalities, unfortunately. But I think it struck home when I lost Bella. Because she was this person everybody looked up at and took all the risk in life and enjoyed life to the fully. But yet we lost her by a simple fall over a dog. Yeah. And I hear what you say, you've got to have these fatalities to be able to make the change. I think as leaders, we need to tell the stories. Yeah. We need to open ourselves up and say, this happened to me. Because you don't necessarily have to have that fatality, but let's talk about it now. Let me tell you my story, and maybe it'll change the way you think. Yeah. And we've seen that work quite well in our organization. We have our CEO one of our CEOs that had a tragic accident with a daughter, and also came up with a story, and it really changes the way people think.
Yeah, so often it's a fatality. Thank you for sharing, Brian. You did say when we spoke on the phone in preparation for this that you'd start off with something personal. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. So thank you. My story of a CEO, I met a company that had just transformed, and the CEO explained what had happened is they killed somebody, and he went to the funeral. And at the funeral, he thought he'd approached the widow, and as he did so, she braced herself, and he thought, I'm going to get slapped here. I can see she's going to slap me or something. But she didn't. She said, I just want to thank you for showing the humility to come and bury my husband with me. It means a lot. He said he completely transformed his attitude to business forever, just in a moment. You know, again, it's just that little thing, isn't it? Sometimes little things have a huge significance. So, a question, please. Okay, well, I'll ask a question, obviously, of Brian. Brian, you're from the world of renewables, yep. Vattenfall. What are you making of these messages that are coming from the world of oil and gas and generic messages?
Yeah, I mean, I think what really hits me today, I think talking openly about, it was actually your talk earlier, Tim, about mental health, psychological safety, mental health, well-being. I think onshore construction, we've for quite some time been stuck in a health and safety mindset rather than the well-being side of things. I know no one really wants to talk about the C word from the last 2 years, but for me that was a big accelerator to starting to talk about mental health, well-being openly in construction. I mean, I come from the onshore renewable side as well, so it's not that it should be, but there's still a kind of an old onshore construction mindset, very, very prevalent in the onshore renewable sector, which from everything I've seen and heard today isn't the same in the oil and gas industry. I know through previous experience it's not the same in offshore wind even, but I think this kind of move towards, mental health, well-being, actually, how are you, genuinely taking the time to ask people how they are and listen and respond to that, I think is, it's something that we are learning and we are catching up with, but I think it's a big step in the right direction as well.
I mean, do you think there's a trend? I mean, I can ask anybody else from your industry, you know, given that renewables is more fluffy, isn't it, and more green, and perceived that way, certainly. Do you think the people it's attracting and the culture that it has lends itself to this kind of caring culture more readily?
I think it helps that the green credentials helps, the sustainability side helps. We're drawing a lot of young people into industry. Before I got into wind, I also worked in some onshore construction, road construction, and it's people who've been building roads up and down the UK since the 70s and 80s. I see in the renewable industry, there's a lot of people they're not in it primarily for the money, they're actually in it because they're trying to do good in society. And I think, yeah, dare I say, be as bold to say that younger generations are potentially more open to talking about these things than perhaps some of the older generations that we're working with in the industry.
I think, Tim, as leaders, we've got to realize that safety is so on the forefront because the accident happens today, we see the blood. But mental well-being and occupational health is an incident just on a different timeline. And as leaders, we've got to shift our focus that we have this wider look at things and not only at the blood that we see today.
Okay. Oh, can I put this out to the audience? You know, I put my little cartoon up. How many of you know somebody really close to you that made you think of them and think they do that? How many people have got somebody really close to you that applies to? Okay. That's very, very quiet. I'm going to flip that round. How many of you don't know anybody that applies to? Which is even less, which is an interesting score.
I can see in the faces of some of the people that don't understand the question. So please, one more time.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. The first question was, how many of you, either yourselves or somebody you're really close to, best friends, partners, immediate family, have mental health issues or are on the borderline there? I'm expecting almost everybody to say yes to that. Yeah? Every time you do a talk like this and you start talking about mental health, half the room start writing, and you can see the change. Yeah. It's just such a huge issue, and so much bigger than safety. In truth, you know, in the UK, 31-1. You're 31 times more likely to bury a colleague because of suicide than you are because of an industrial accident. And we're beginning to understand Heinrich's principle underneath that, you know. If that's the suicide stuff, what about the people who are just having a really bad day? And what are they in charge of, and what decisions are they taking, and what interactions are they having? And what's their lifestyle when they get outside and have drink available and so on? I am. Okay, if I fall, I'll fall. I won't reach you. You're okay.
No, doesn't work like.
Okay, I am very mindful of it. Although I just move the chair now behind me, so I'll be mindful of it and try and stand here. So I should maybe go around the outside, shouldn't I? Because I can see them and so. Oh, okay. Another question, please. Somebody must have a question about.
Very interesting to me. So many of you work in multinational corporations, and I'm interested in how the sense of mental health and well-being is accepted across different cultures in different countries in these multinational corporations. Because I can tell you I'm from the United States, and we are not there yet. So I ask you, working as safety and health professionals, how do you handle that?
So you're not there in America yet?
I'm from the United States.
Yeah, okay. You were about to speak, Steve.
Yeah, you're spot on. And I even think in the Danish area, we're still in building our path or building our history in that area. We put it into our safety value back in 2019. So yes, we have spoken about it, but we haven't been able to explore it as totally outspoken in the way we have managed in the company. And you're absolutely right, we have colleagues in Asia where to have a dialogue with them on this subject, that's very difficult, more or less impossible. But I think that doesn't give us a barrier not to take the journey. And I think absolutely right. If you look in the COVID-19 situation, we will have also in the Danish area, we will have a lot of mental issues. We have it, and it will be even more going forward with some of the young people who has been locked down for a long period. A reflection to some of the things we discussed before. We are saying in the oil and gas industry that we far advanced in our way of looking at HSE compared to some other industries. Once in a while, I'm reflecting on why are we that? Is it because that we are brighter, we are clever, or whatever? For me, it's actually, unfortunately, back to we had a lot of fatalities. First, it started with explosions. Then we had helicopter stitching. Then we had a lot of things. So we needed to come to a position where fatality had to come close to us.
Yeah.
And if we look at other industries, so unfortunately, us as a leader, we need to have something, as you told, so close to us that we start to react. So we as leaders start to do something differently. We need to be more proactive before we get a fatality in front of us. And that has been one of the inspirations for me, that we have a colleague here from Esbjerg who told to an audience in this forum, where we had it in Semco Maritime, that one of his colleagues died, and he had to tell his wife that the colleague died. And I don't want to be in that position. And how do I do that? I'm not there. We have a lot of things we can learn from. But that inspires me. Also working in other industries, we have split in offshore wind and split in oil and gas. And for me, there's not a difference in the industry we are in. The difference is which kind of responsibility do I take as leader? In the communication, the 45 minutes per day, which I'm not there. The decisions I make together with my team and the way I talk to the board in other companies and with colleagues.
Okay. Thank you. I think the oil and gas is so good. I'm a bit cynical about this. I think it's because big accidents offshore are so incredibly inconvenient and disruptive.
Yeah, inconvenient.
Yep. Oh, but that's a bit. That's a cynical view. Yeah. Okay. Did you notice that I jumped all over the joke about American sanity and Trump? Did you see that? I didn't even go there. Please. Oh, jeez.
How do you propose to start on focusing on mental health? Because obviously there's a lot of businesses that might not be prepared for it just yet. So what would you propose on how to tackle that difficulty?
Who wants to take that first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share my own experiences. I think the very first step is talking about it. We were very fortunate, and within the project managers that I work with, we had someone open up, and actually that almost started floodgates within the team and even within the wider business area that I work in, where he was feeling, psychologically, safety kind of comes to the core of it. He was feeling safe enough and confident enough to share that with the wider team. Even an online video call with 200 people, and that really just starts getting the ball rolling. Now that's very much on an employer level, a developer level. It's not even kind of scratching the surface of, who did we have earlier? We had, who were our characters from this morning? Dave and Martin. How do we get Dave and Martin on site speaking about these things, where Dave is open and going to have a conversation with Martin or with their supervisors about it? I think that's a real challenge, and actually that's where we as an industry, across the board, need to really work together to be able to get that level of safety culture in place where people are confident enough to talk about it openly.
Yeah, and it's basic techniques, isn't it? We spend a lot of time teaching emotional intelligence for health and safety, how to give people bad news without winding them up, the BIFF technique, biff off technique, the feedback fish for coaching, assertion techniques like broken record. Spend a lot of time doing that. And you'd be amazed at the industries who have lots and lots of people in charge of people doing dangerous work who know none of this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable. In fact, a question for you again. How many of you have got frontline supervisors that you would say have been really well trained in emotional intelligence techniques, like assertion, active listening, how to give negative feedback? How many of you think actually our frontline supervisors get bloody good training and we follow it up and embed it well too? Not just run them on a training course and collect the happy sheets. We actually make sure they're good at it by checking up on the front line. How many do that? Okay, right. Okay. If anybody's interested in some training.
Maybe a comment or a question that time. I don't think, certainly we're not an onshore, maybe oil and gas are separate, maybe someone will correct me on that. In terms of safety checks, you know, KPIs, safety walks, lagging indicators or leading indicators, we don't really talk about mental well-being in that.
No.
Okay.
But I think to answer the question just now, I think if you don't build this open and honest discussion, if you stick on traditional safety workspace stuff, and you don't bring in this communication, this engagement with people, they're never even going to talk to you about mental health. They're going to keep quiet about it. It's not discussed at company level. It's not going to be discussed at any of the levels. They need that secure base. There's somebody to go talk to. But you only get that through the change away from only the controls to more people and culture-based.
Yeah, I can give you a case study if I can. I'll come to you. Finnair had a program where that you could put yourself forward for counselling. You didn't have to go through triage or any sort of assessment. If you said you needed to speak to a psychologist you got to spoke to, and a lot of people thought, well, that's going to be abused. Everybody's going to be on the couch all day. We'll have nobody flying our planes. But what they found was that wasn't abused, and every metric that they were interested in went in the right direction. Turnover, absenteeism, presenteeism, all sorts of other soft measures of above-the-line behaviour all went in the right direction. Incredibly cost-effective. I think they quote, for every euro they invested, 10 euros saved. Just by saying, if you're really struggling, you can speak to somebody straight away, no triage or anything. So, you were about to say.
Reflection. We just had an audit, and we were audited on our HSE performance. And the auditor asked me, okay, you're reporting LTAs, TRIFs, and so on. Where are the stress-related incidents? Where do you report those? Oof. I had to call somebody to get some help. The first explanation was, of course, well, we don't do it because it's personal. You know, it could be from the private, it could be in relationship to one of the managers, it could be, and if you have mental, you potentially don't want to explore that to everybody, but we are telling everybody that if they break a leg or take an arm away. So that at least made me thinking we need to do something on the reporting side. So we have 5 stress-related persons in Semco Maritime currently in the Nordic organization. I don't know for Singapore and for US. 3 is coming from offshore and 2 is onshore. That tells me that is an area to explore on, let's say, how do we, first of all, engage with, we are supplier to, how do we engage with our customers? Because stress-related on an offshore platform, there has to be an interaction with our with the people who is there. Related to our own premises, it's in our own hand, in the leadership and the way we talk to people and engage with them. So it's definitely something that is kept under the carpet, you can say, not well explored yet, but it's definitely something we should have taken care of, and we need to take even more care of going forward. Especially when we need to work much longer than we've had in the past.
Okay. Question, please.
I'd like to come back to the question you asked the audience before, Tim, about frontline workers being trained for handling or taking these talks. What about asking the same question for the back office, for the leaders higher in the hierarchy?
Okay. Well, I will then. You'd hope that they get better quality training, wouldn't you? Okay, for those of you who are aware of the training levels of your senior management, the C-suite and maybe one rung down, how many of them would you think have clearly been trained in emotional intelligence skills given the way they behave? Definitely, no. My C-suite and everybody else who works with them, they're excellent. They've obviously just read Dale Carnegie's book and they live it. How many of you work in organizations with that? That's your answer, Liz. Oh.
But isn't that the marvelous thing about leadership? Let's say we all need to develop all the times. I think if we're going 3 or 4 years back, none of us was aware of the impact that COVID-19 could have on leadership and the way we need to do or step up. Nobody of us 3 months ago or 4 months ago realized, at least in Europe, what we need to do with the Ukraine war or the Russia invading Ukraine. It push a tremendous push on our organizations. And of course we need to step up. We as CEOs need to step up. We need to have the whole leadership team to step up. So what we learned 1 year ago, maybe we need to do something differently going forward.
But the basics are the basics, aren't
the basics are the basics.
You know, you listen, you engage, you respect. Please, Xavier.
Sure. This is an interesting topic because the topic we're talking relates to HR. When we think about metrics, we can talk about absenteeism, we can talk about attitude surveys, which are HR driven. We can talk about works council, union reps. All of these functions and aspects relate to HR. Maybe not as much HSE, but clearly the same mechanisms are there. Again, if you go back to organizations, it's how do they relate? And very often they are arm's length. Not my issue. So, and we said yesterday evening, Tim, some companies do combine HR, HSE. And that could be a nice thought for the future. But traditionally, HSE have to be seen as independent. Arm's length with the way, operations, maintenance may want to manipulate, for example, inspection, which is part of HSE. So maybe there's a thought about how tomorrow's world is around combining HR, HSE, because so far I've seen metrics more in the HR camp. Just a thought.
I think
absolutely. I wonder if I could bring Brian in. I think you're bringing yourself in there. It's great. But Brian talked very much about safety culture being a subset of culture. So the obvious person to.
And it's something I've had a discussion with a friend of mine about, because when we saw safety moving towards objects, it's more or less a time that we moved away from HR into engineering departments. And you're right, I think we need to shift that back. Whether we go back to HR, I'm not sure, but at least find that balance and work on the cultures and the subcultures. But I think there's a clear indication we shifted away from HR to engineering. And that's why we look at the 5 red steps, and we don't look at the yellow and the green above it.
Speaking as a consultant, when we set projects up, when we our holistic approach to all this, one of my key metrics is how well do HR and HSE get on. If they're sat head-to-head after the kick-off sessions, working out how they're going to do this, how are we going to follow up the leadership, how can we interact with the training, great. If they're at other ends of the table looking at their budgets, and not so great. Please. Oh, gentlemen, I'm afraid there's a bit of a run for you. He's right at the back there.
Thank you. I think you have the discussion in all organizations about well-being, welfare, and so on. But it's probably with your colleagues. You're probably asking your colleagues, "How are you doing today? Did you have a long weekend? Did you sleep well? How's your injury?" and so on. And are you busy? Are you getting stressed? So yeah, I think you have these discussions in companies, all companies, but with colleagues. It's not that it's not discussed, it's discussed among peers. So I think that maybe that underlines the problem, that you don't have the discussion up and down the company, but at the same level. I talk to my colleagues about this every day. They ask about me, I ask about them. I think that's quite normal in every workplace. So I think your challenge is a bit different than the way we're talking about it.
Yeah, there's a big study in the UK, TRIM, which is about Marines, found that peers talking to peers was more effective than talking to a trained psychologist. But I'd add that on top of that, you definitely want the supervisor, the management saying, are you okay? Are you thriving? If you're not, what do you need from me? It needs to be a two-pronged attack, I think, as ever, top-down and empowered. Any thoughts? I come to Brian, if I could, first.
Yeah, I think for me it's the difference between saying the words and meaning the words as well. It's not going through the motions of how are you, have a check-in at the start of a meeting because you have to have a check-in. It's, taking the time to actually listen and, react on that. And I think that's, we have to be very careful not just to go through the motions of it.
It's listening with intent.
Yeah.
Not just passing by how you. Hopefully he doesn't say anything.
And to steal a joke from Harry, what was that? Sorry. Please.
Agree fully.
Okay.
And I think the headspace picture gives a lot of thought in respect of this, really to ensure that you are there to ask the right question and dare to listen, because it could be that we are asking the question and not listening, because we don't need to take part of the responsibility afterwards.
Yeah.
So headspace picture is
a good point. Dare to listen. It's an open door policy. You can come in whenever you want, say what you want, just say the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, it's a gentleman here. Conveniently situated next to a microphone.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question to the presentation Brian from Mundi you made. Seems like you've gone from 0 accidents, 0 incidents to 0 fatalities, 0 life-changing incidents. Accepting that some colleagues get hurt in a milder way, or what do you say? Do you see that as a giving up, a step back, or going forward? And before you answer, Brian, I would like Brian and Steen to answer first, because I bet their KPI is different. And then after here, what your take is on it, if that's okay.
I think potential Brian's KPIs is the same as us. I think what we are working with is to ensure that we're also categorizing the different yellow cards or incidents we're getting in order to ensure we're prioritizing the efforts we're putting into it. Does mean that we are not looking into if the snitch could lead to a fatality at a certain time. But it's better we need to use the energy right in order to do the investigation in the right manner, which I think the MICE or MICS was brilliant, because we tend to, in our investigation, the conversation around with the people who is close to where it's happening, we tend to miss that opportunity to get, let's say, the real things back, and thereby be able to prioritize. So stitches is better than a fatality.
Yeah, I think same for us. It's the kind of magnitude of consequences. So if we have a year without, lost time injuries, then you'll look at, the next metric down the line, and so on and so on. I think that's just kind of the ongoing progression there to try and improve as an organisation as well.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I was hoping somebody would challenge me on this. It's not losing, it's not getting weaker. It's about building trust in the organisation. So we don't want to have fatalities. And unfortunately, in the pulp and paper industry and forestry, you have a lot of fatalities. So we know we're going to get injured. We know we're going to have a paper cut. That's harm. And I like to use the word zero harm with a capital H. So what is harm? Is it the mental well-being? Is it the stress we put on people? Or is it the blood? And if we talk about zero harm, then it's got to be everything. And we cannot say we don't have harm. We put pressure on people. We have injuries. We have cardinal rules in organizations. So we send somebody home because they've broken the cardinal rule. It doesn't mean we've done the wrong thing, but we have harmed them because he's gone home without a job. So if you look at harm, you've got to look at it in the wider perspective, not only injuries. And if you look at COVID, it showed it as well how this whole mental well-being has come out of COVID. So I think it's a step forward rather than a step backwards, because we're allowing this. We understand we are fallible human beings, like Bella. She was fallible. And we understand that people who work for us are fallible. They will make mistakes. Your unconscious drives most of your behavior. So if I throw you a ball now, you're going to catch it without thinking. It's no different to the person in the machine seeing a bit of dirt in the machine and quickly doing it. So if your unconscious drives your body, or a lot of your actions, how can we say zero harm is not possible? Or how can we say zero harm is possible, sorry. And that's and it's opened up the discussion. We haven't put it out in lights, zero harm's gone. We have a simple icon, I think it might have been on my presentation. Work safe, home safe, everybody, every day. We're not saying you're not going to get injured, but our drive is to send you home safely. But we do understand you're going to have injuries. We also felt that zero harm might cause people to hide injuries because we want to keep that 2 million hours. So let's do away with that. And let's still have our lag indicators, let's have our lead indicators. And what about the third level of indicators, which you can't measure? So if I ask you, are you married, and you've got a ring, what does a ring mean to you?
That I'm married.
That you're married. No, some people are happily married, happier once married.
Happily, yeah.
But if I say to you, out of 1 in 10, how much do you love your wife?
9, 10, yeah.
Oh. That's right.
She might be watching, so yeah, 10, exactly. 11.
That's right.
But the camera's that way.
You might love your wife 10 out of 10, but you might not like her today, you know. But it's something you can't measure. But we tend to only want to look at the things we can measure. But what are those things we can't measure that touches mental well-being, that touches culture, that touches headspace? And I think it's a shift in the right direction. I hope I answered your question, but I'm willing to chat with you outside as well.
Okay. I think just one more question, if there is one. People are wafting themselves, people are hot. Just these two together, since they're next to each other, and then we'll stop for coffee.
All right, thank you. So when we talk about mental well-being, I've noticed that the focus usually is on how supervisors talk to the teammates and how leaders encourage the team members to be more open about, their mental state and when they're having issues. However, I've noticed that, one of the hindrances that you see with that, at least when I discuss with people I work with, is some employees are worried that coming out and opening up on issues like that could affect their prospects in the company, So do you want to take a guy who's just come to tell you he's suffering from depression or serious anxiety and put him in a position where there is even more pressure and, possibility for anxiety? And I think that maybe one of the things that could solve that is when we actually see the supervisors and the leaders, people higher up in the organizations, being more vulnerable, coming out and speaking about their own challenges and how they deal with their mental health issues. Only then do we open the door for people to be more open, about issues like that. Do you think that we're addressing that enough? And how do you think that organizations should begin to talk about that, talk about things in that direction even more? Not just about checking in with people and asking how they are doing, but having the leaders higher up being more open and making it obvious that, you can still progress in the organization, you can still make something of a career for yourself, even if you have these issues.
Who wants to go first? Okay, I'll jump in on that one then. We're seeing a lot of it now. This stuff about talking about real life experience. And so I did a job for a management board the other day, and I talked about how good work is good for you, how it can break the chain. If you know cheese model, it can actually break the chain if everything around is going wrong. The CFO started crying and said, God, that resonates, that really resonates. And it's about something to do with one of his children. We had to stop the session for half an hour while he composed himself. We came back, we all agreed we were going to do some disclosure stuff. We asked the CEO if he'd lead it. He runs a crane company. And he said, well, I'll lead it, but I can't speak. And we said, why not? Is it too emotional for you? He said, no, I suffer from crippling social anxiety. It's everywhere. As soon as you start talking about it, everybody's got a story, and everybody is much more likely to admit to their own vulnerability. This guy was an ex-rugby league professional, 6'3", built like this, ran a crane company. And I can't speak in public, it's not happening.
But I think your question was more about, let's say, do we punish or are people not being able to move up if they are open? I think that was, yeah. That's a good point. I haven't thought about that.
I see the opposite. Sorry, okay. I see the opposite, where people are scared to talk up because they're scared they won't move up. You know, so burnout is, some people see it as embarrassing. And if I talk about it, maybe I won't get the next promotion because I might not be able to handle the next level. So I see the other side of it.
Yeah. And it's true, of course. You know, we do still judge, especially for a bloke of a certain age and a certain background. It's really difficult to not carry that with you. So you probably are best advised to keep it to yourself to an extent, under certain circumstances in certain organisations. Final word, Brian?
Yeah, I'd probably disagree on that. I think actually being open about it is the big positive. If you're in a, you know, coming back to safety culture, company mentality, and you know the leadership, you know, culture around that. If all of these things have been constructed properly and are properly constructed, you should have a safe space where you can open up about these things and be given the right help and the right tools to, you know, do what's best for you. If you suffer these things, the company shouldn't be putting you into a position where you're going to be speaking on stage all the time, for example. But they should be able to find opportunities that would be more suited to, you know, your, I don't want to call limitations, but your, you know, the concerns that you may face. They can have that responsibility, social responsibility, to look after you in that sense as well. So, you know, I think it's important that it is talked about and talked about openly as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because, let's say, I could say that we have managers in our organization who have had a problem in the past, potentially still have, but that's kept between the supervisor and the person itself and not common knowledge because we don't share it or the person don't want to share it. But we know if somebody have broken a leg, we know exactly who it was because we made the incident report. So then the question is, how do we ensure that we can speak openly about it, also for the person who has the problem doesn't feel uncomfortable at the same time, because we see that a lot in dialogues. They like privately or whatever, don't want to have it coming out in the open. Maybe because they're afraid of not being promoted or being penalized by the peer group. So that's a quite interesting topic. That.
No, so I'd just say I'm quite cynical about some of these things, you know. But if you proactively have a holistic approach to making the overall problem smaller, you know, it's a smaller problem, regardless of which one of us is right here. I think you had a question. Ideally, it's a very quick one.
Ahead of this conference, I had a couple of topics on my agenda. I'm very glad that a few of those have been already covered, and very important is human performance. In my daily work, I'm process safety engineer, and we have the hardware barriers and the human barriers. And in terms of human barriers, we are facing the human performance. And looking just across the fence, one of the most successful industries is the aviation industries, and they introduced this topic, if I'm not wrong, 15 years ago, and we just now start looking into this. So, and there's a lot of copy-paste that we can do from them. Training can be taken one-to-one because it's fully applicable to our industry and to every industry, basically. So this is not a question, it's just a reflection, and if you share a few thoughts, would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, crew resource management, everybody should be doing it, and so on. Final comments, please? On you know, crew resource management and all the stuff that aviation is doing that's top of the tree on some of this stuff.
You know, cross-industry learning, isn't it? I mean, it's across the board. You know, I think we've also seen learnings coming from kind of people in military background. You know, offshore, onshore, oil, gas. You know, whatever it is. I think it's really key to make sure that we develop as an industry by doing that.
Yeah, and I think as a profession as well. So the risk and safety profession needs to develop further, and you only do that through networking across industries, and a forum like this gives you that opportunity as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, maybe as back to Xavier's comment before that for me HSE is definitely about leadership. So it's definitely about HR as well. It's about let's say who we are and how we act and how we are interacting with each other.
Okay, great. And on that point, I'd say if you could please give a round of applause for the 3 panelists.
Thanks, Brian.